don't know me, I'm Katie. I'm the content marketing manager at ClearanceJobs.com. Former to doing this role, I was a recruiter, so still recovering even 5 years later. So today I'm really excited. So Lindy said, hold on. I'm gonna say hold on to your pens because I feel like this is going to be the best panel. It's gonna have the most takeaways. So I'm really excited to introduce, we have Michaela from Defense Unicorns. We have Stephanie from MetroStar. And I wanted to set the stage, so could you tell us what Defense Unicorns actually does?
Oh, my microphone's working now. I was about to say it's not. Okay. We specialize in air gap, providing software in air gap environments. So think limited connectivity, no internet, submarines, up in space, downrange. That's kind of what our specialty is.
So all like the weird roles. So today I really want to talk about like how they're hiring technical talent, but also how they leverage technology to actually reach that talent. I mean, every panel today has like talked about AI, like AI is so hot right now, but I feel like tactical takeaways on how to use technology is what's going to be most useful. So Steph, for you, what are sort of your biggest hurdles right now with the technical talent that you're recruiting?
Yeah, so is this working? Is it on? I don't think it's working. Okay, I was like, I can yell, I can stand up and yell. Hi, I'm Stephanie Holman. I recruit for MetroStar, so we do like digital services and solutions, but we recruit in the intel, defense, and national security space. Right now, I mean, the competition, right? Look at all of you in this room, you probably recruit on some similar roles. Right now, the biggest challenge for me, I recruit at the senior level. So I'm looking for individuals that have 6 or more years experience. Most of the time it's 10. Also at the TS, SCI, and CI Poly level. And then my teams are looking for very specialized skills, specifically Kubernetes. Right now, the running joke in my family is, God forbid something happens to me, right? On my headstone, it's gonna read loving, wife, mother, died looking for a Kubernetes engineer. Because they're really hard to find. They're really hard to find. Thank you for the laugh, by the way. I didn't know how that would go over. And with Kubernetes, it's not just a foundational level of like understanding. It's, can you install, deploy, hardened secure containers? Have you used Rancher and OpenShift? It's this whole laundry list of things, very specific things that I'm looking for. And like I said, the competition it's tough.
Right. Well, and it's a tale as old as time. Like you're obviously working with hurdles like government requirements, but then like everything else added into it. So in addition to the Kubernetes engineer positions, for both of your markets, what are some other of sort of the hardest to fill positions today? And so we'll start with you, Michaela.
You can do it. Is it gonna, oh, now, see, all I had to do was take it from you. Kubernetes is one of the hardest ones. That's what my company mainly works with at the moment. So finding someone like that, but also in that environment who wants to work for the DoD. That's another thing, and that's something extremely important and extremely hard, is to make sure you're upfront with that and saying like, hey, you're gonna work for the DoD, like the warfighter, like war. That's not something that all engineers like to be a part of. And so I love Andrel's marketing right now with like being so straightforward with it because it's so important. But that one, but also being in a startup, it's like the wild, wild west. And recently learning like marketing to the DoD is different. Sales in the DoD is different. And explaining how contracts work in the DoD and how they're like, the way the government fluctuates and everything that's going on right now, like how those contracts might come out is difficult. And so finding people who have this highly technical skill set, but also understand how to navigate that DoD space and know how to talk to people from the DoD, that's hard too.
Yeah, if I can just add to that. So Tommy Weiner, when he was up earlier, he talked about being transparent, right? So just building off of what you were touching on, a lot of my positions, they're on military bases. How many military veterans are in here right now? Just show of hands, right? So you all know this, right? Military bases, they're kind of boring. All the buildings look the same. They're not as fancy and fun as some big tech companies. And so that's something I set those expectations when I'm engaging with the folks that I'm reaching out to let them know, like, realistically what you are literally walking into, what the environment's gonna look around you.
Well, and hello. Even when I was recruiting, I'm sure it's still the same today, especially with certain contracts that you're pricing to win, salaries may not be the best. Maybe it's a terrible location or just something that's just not attractive. Like, location was a huge issue for me. I'm sure it is today. How do you overcome things like that? Both of you, whoever wants to take it.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. You really have to get down to, like, what is motivating this person? What are they looking for? And be able to speak to the mission and the team that you're supported. So at a deeper level there, I'll speak with senior engineers who say, hey, Steph, so who's on the team, right? Like, how many engineers are on the team? What positions are they in? Who are these people? What are their personalities like? And that's been something that I've positioned myself to be at the table with the team that I support and in reoccurring meetings. So I get to know them on that one-on-one level. And sometimes being able to speak to that, it closes that gap when someone's like, oh, I don't know that I want to drive 45 minutes, across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge at 4:30, because they start, like, hearing more about the team and getting excited about it.
Yeah, right when you were saying that, I just thought about an engineer that we have who we brought in from, like, more of the open source space, which hiring people from open source into DoD type of roles is hard as well. But, like, emphasizing that mission and how important it is, because back in the day when I was working as a civilian with the Air Force, and I remember going to Qualtrics and just learning about, like, how to best hire and just all their, like, they had a super cool office. They had scooters in there and all the, like, the beanbag chairs and the scream room and all the stuff. And I was like, how do I sell my mission? Because I feel like this stuff is so cool. And, like, I'm on the Air Force base, and they were like, you guys have one of the most important missions. It is protecting the country. That is so important. And I was like, just going in on that is what I took back. And then to now seeing this engineer, he got to go sit in the cockpit of an F-16, and he was like, never in my life, like, did I think I would be able to have this experience to be able to do something like this. And how we phrase it at Defense Unicorns, what I've told candidates is, like, imagine the tech you're working with now, and imagine taking your skill set and putting it in, like, one of the hardest environments and seeing how far your skill set and that tech can go and pushing it to those limits. And that usually gets them pretty excited. They're like, I'm developing, filters for your face on Facebook, and I'm working at these, like, these big tech companies, and I kind of want to see, like, where I can go with this, like, how far can I push the tech?
Yeah, and I think that's a constant theme, like pushing the mission. It's been something that's, since I've been recruiting, that's been important. So I know that we've touched on it today. We have to touch on it now because we've spoken with a lot of AI experts, but you all are in hiring and recruiting and in the trenches. So changing market dynamics with government contracting. So this can mean, like, obviously what we're dealing with today, but also, proposals, contract wins, contract losses. So, like, how do these affect the recruitment process, and how do you deal with it in hiring?
Yeah, so I'm going to take this one. Again, I got to give credit to where credit's due with Tommy, because he touches on such good things. And he talked about trust, right? Having integrity. You don't shy away from hard questions. It took me a really long time to be okay with that, right? Saying, like, hey, I am on the front lines. These are the concerns that my candidates have. I can't answer these questions, right? Because I don't have enough knowledge or information around it. And now I'm very upfront of, like, this is what I'm hearing from my candidates. can you fill in the gap for me here? I think the landscape we're in is constantly evolving. Coming to events like this, it's really personally benefited me. This is my 3rd year, and I've always walked away better and knowing more and having more connections. It makes me feel less alone because it is tough to recruit in this space. I'm still green, guys, 3 years in. You know, I don't have much gray hair yet. The ones that are in here that I've recruited for 10, 15 years, like, I have so much respect for you because, again, it's so hard. So we have to stay, you know, informed, like you were talking about with learning more about, you know, contracts, proposals. The team that, or the company I recruit for, MetroStar, they have an open door policy around if you want to get involved and learn more, come get involved and learn more. But you have to have that internal motivation to say, okay, hey, I have no idea how proposals work and I'd like to know more. That has been a game changer for me to then talk about like pre-awards. How do pre-awards work? Now I know because I've sat, you know, in multiple meetings.
Absolutely. What about you, Michaela?
I feel like over at Defense Unicorns is all kind of like a team effort, and when it's not a team effort, that's when things aren't great. Like, and always need to be like, hey, we all need to be on the same page with this. Like the timing of, and I don't know how many times we've been like, the contract's gonna land in another 2 weeks, and another 2 weeks, and another 2 weeks. And what does that mean for candidates? Like, that sucks that you extended a job offer and now you're like, it's not there. It's okay, the contract, okay, listen, this is how the government works and it's not always fun, but yeah. So this is what I tell my recruiting team, like, be transparent, going back to that trust, being honest, like, this is what we're dealing with, this is what we're looking at. Like right now we're doing contingent offers at Defense Unicorns because I'm like, I don't want to get in a situation where the contract was awarded faster than the hiring, or that the hiring was faster than the contract. And now we have this weird in-between where either you have a candidate coming in where they're like, I'm eager, I'm ready to work. You guys got me really excited through the recruiting process, now what? And you're like, we're not ready for you yet because things are taking a long time. Or you have that candidate who's sitting there ready to start and things aren't timing. Like that's, I mean, I'm not an expert in it because we're literally doing this right now. I'm like building the plane as it's flying of like, let's try to get this timing synced up so perfectly that the candidate doesn't have a crappy experience onboarding, but.
It is what it is. I mean, transparent communication, trust, and I mean, we'll get into, you know, using technology, but that's one thing that tech isn't going to take away is that human experience and, you know, feeling cared for throughout, you know, the recruitment or hiring process. So let's talk about innovative strategies that you may have found effective in attracting candidates for those difficult to fill roles. So Steph, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I don't know how like innovative this is exactly, but I went straight to the team, the engineers that I support, and I asked them, right? Like, what attracted you to this company? Where did you come from? I had their resume, but I wanted to have that one-on-one experience with them to hear it from them. You know, were they in a competing offer situation? What was the differentiator? Why did they choose us? Now, it sounds simple, but it wasn't, right? Because the teams, the managers, they're very protective, and rightfully so, of their team's time, right? They don't want to take away from their time and resources. So I did a lot of relationship building to get into that position to then ask for those one-on-ones with these senior engineers to learn more about, again, what attracted them to the company. So it took some time, but look at the resumes of the folks that you already have, compare them across the board, and then mix some AI into it, right? And ask it, you know, are there similarities here? That helps me in my sourcing to then know, like, who am I looking for? What are the profiles that work for this particular team?
Absolutely, Michaela.
So I was employee 22 at Defense Unicorns, and so I got to kind of start it from the ground up. Not the company. By no means I'm an engineer, but the recruiting process, which I was wicked excited about because recruiting for the government is not fun at all. So I was like, I get to do this, cool. But I went into it like, how am I attracting this talent that's being hired at all these amazing places? And Defense Unicorns is this new company with a unicorn as the logo. And that's kind of like, defense contractor with a unicorn as the logo. Like, are they gonna take us seriously? And so I went off of like building this feverish branding and also having our engineers become like, I use the word influencers and they don't like that. I'm like, okay, advocates. Let's do advocates for Defense Unicorns, because I felt like, number one, people would be seeing us on different platforms and be like, what are they up to now? And then number two, when you start hiring those people and you're hiring amazing people, and then others are like, wait a minute, why did that person go there? Because if he's doing this type of work and he's over there, I kind of want to work with him because I know that he's doing something cool. And so it became kind of like, you know, we have the engineers helping out with the content we're putting out, and we have the engineers in the process, in the interviews, helping out and giving their feedback to the candidates on what it's like to work there and stuff. And that genuinely helped, because they're like, well, I know you, Miss Recruiter, are gonna tell me how amazing it is and how sparkly and unicorny it is to work there, but like, I wanna hear from someone who I'm gonna be working alongside. And I wanna talk about my code, and I wanna talk about the tech that you guys are working with. And sometimes it's getting easier, but it's hard for us to talk about that stuff as recruiters, unless you're, you know, very good at coding on the side. So that's kind of where I went with it and started, was like getting them interested that way, and then using our people internally to put out more and more content. And it was all like learning. It wasn't that we wanted to be a source of knowledge. And if we could be a source of knowledge, then people would seek us out, not only to work with us, but also to work for us too.
Yeah, I mean, excellent ideas. Utilizing, I mean, employee referral programs, obviously, I'm sure every company here has them implemented, but probably doesn't leverage them as much as they should. But also leveraging them as advocates, ambassadors for content, things like that. I was best friends, like not only with the hiring managers, because it made approvals go a lot quicker, but also with the team leads and, you know, the site leads that were actually working directly on customer site. Like, ask for a one-on-one meeting with them. Like, hey, come to HQ, like meet with candidates. It just helps, I guess, have someone in your corner throughout the process. Yes, please.
So how many of you have lost someone to a competing offer? Just raise of hands. Have you followed up? Have you looked to see, you know, the company that the person went to? And then have you compared benefits? I think that's another piece here. I feel like we're constantly researching, you know, and comparing different company benefits. That's helped as well, because then I can take that data back to the team and say, okay, we got beat. You know, maybe the 401k, you know, match is a little bit better, or they had different tools and technologies the person wanted to, you know, work with.
Yeah, and that's all data that you know, can house and keep for, you know, all the candidates that you're kind of working with. One thing that really used to tick me off with some of the contractors I would go on board with is when they would just post the job description from the statement of work, like straight up, and it was like disgustingly vague, and like, who would want to work here? Like, what are you doing? So how important is it to redefine job descriptions and qualifications? Again, with those unclassified statement of works that you might be working with in particular.
Yeah, so obviously in the space that we work in, our job descriptions cannot be like explicitly detailed, right? We know that. I think the biggest thing for a tech recruiter in this space, you have to be able to speak to the job description or beyond it, right? What does this team do? What's the mission beyond the team? Is it concise? Is it compelling? I mean, I read when a hiring manager drafts the job description, I read it multiple times. For different reasons. And one of them too is just baseline. Does it make sense, right? Are there any grammar or spelling issues? Because what does that say about your company if something, you know, looks off there? And then going back to the team members that you have access to, again, ask them, like, what did you like about the company's job descriptions, what didn't you like? I think there's a lot to be gained there. Going over like the must-haves and the nice-to-haves, I go back and forth with my team. Like, okay, do we really need 6 years of experience? And then why? Can you fill me in on the why? So then I can speak to that as well. If I'm seeing a high number of applicants that are coming in at the 5-year mark, you know, I need to have those, be able to have those conversations of like, why does that additional year matter?
I hate the education requirements, and I hate years of experience requirements. Hear me out, hear me out. If you're doing that, if you're putting that on your job recs, ask yourself why. Like, is this truly, truly, truly a position that needs an education requirement? Or the years of experience? Because I see so many bright people who are way faster than their peers in learning these things, or they're taking courses online, or they're just in GitHub 24/7, like learning all this stuff. And we'll find that like there's someone who doesn't, who's your system might be rating them out, or you might be like, oh, there's not those years of experience there. But when you take them to the next interview, in that technical interview, and that you start to assess their skill sets, they're exactly what you needed. So that's something that I have always been like very adamant about, because I don't get it always. I'm like, why the education requirements and the years of experience? Like, you're missing out on a whole lot of talent when you do that. When you have a specific position that like a lawyer or a doctor and things like that, okay, I get it. Like, I get it. Put the years of experience, put the education requirement on there. It's needed for the position. But a lot of these technical positions, take another look at it. And if it's your leadership who's saying that, it's easy to say question them, but question them. Ask, is this really necessary? And maybe even have to prove it. Find someone who is good and say, I will show you. Put them in the skill set portion, like let's test their code, let's have engineers review it, and let's see, you know, if they can stand up to what your requirements are.
Yeah, and I think it was the first Connect, and probably every single Connect following that. I've always said if it's a government requirement, like ask for a waiver, become like buddy-buddy, or at least your leadership should become buddy-buddy with the core. Ask for that waiver. And it actually will get a candidate in the door and a billet filled, and then, you know, your company and leadership is extremely happy. So Kubernetes engineers, do you all have like a loaded pipeline of those?
So the team, my team knows this. Andy's in the back. I've said this to him multiple times. I'm not fishing. I'm literally on the beach building the canoe to go out and fish. Sourcing is intense, right? I don't get a lot of folks on the senior level roles with Kubernetes applying. I am actively finding them every day. You know, talent isn't going to show up. So one thing that we've done at MetroStar, it's really cool, we've gotten this off the ground in the last year, is we built a Kubernetes boot camp, right? Because we were wasting so many sourcing cycles trying to find the unicorn, and there's few and far in between. So we built this boot camp, and hopefully we'll scale that up. And that's starting to help, right? We're having to find the talent and upskill them ourselves.
Well, and that's a beautiful way to build a talent pipeline. So how does Defense Unicorns do that?
Same kind of thing, but also like if an engineering manager comes to you and says, we need this role, they need to know this, and then going back and being like, what coding language leads to learning that? Like, do you think that if they had a strong foundation in blank, they could easily pick up what we're doing? And then they're like, oh yeah, definitely. And I was like, okay, there we go. So it's not a hard requirement. Like, and that's something that I love to use ChatGPT for, by the way. Like, if we're gonna talk AI and making things easier, is going into there and be like, what comparable languages and like, what are we looking at in terms of upskilling these types of people? We also had developed an internal type of boot camp called Sparkle Academy. where we're teaching people Kubernetes too, because Kubernetes is new. It's just like any other new tech where it's like, we need blank, and it's like, oh, there's only like 5 of them out there, and half of them are at Amazon, you know? And it's like, well, I can't pay them what they're making over there. How am I gonna entice these people here? And so like, what's the word I'm looking for? Investing in building them up is important. But I also, like, all of this comes full circle because it's not just recruiting, it's the relationship we have with HR as a whole, and then how valuable leadership sees HR in recruiting, because some of these things are hard to explain to them, and they'll say, oh, go find me a Kubernetes engineer who also knows AI, who works at Minot, that has this clearance, and you're like, whoa. Or they'll just come to me with like this position that I'm like, hey, this isn't real. Okay, go look on any job board site and look up this title. This job does not exist. And I'm like, we'll see what we can do in terms of like putting some of these duties together to create a little bit of a hybrid role. But what you're asking for is like 4 different positions with a crazy clearance in a location that doesn't make sense. I wish I had a tool for you guys. I could just tell you, like, these are where these people are lurking. Like, it's in the Kubernetes Slack, or it's over here on this website we don't know about, where all the engineers are living there, and that's how you're going to go get them. Those healthy conversations with the hiring managers on, hey, let's look at this. Is this realistic? Like, what could we work with? What type of work are we willing to put in to educate this person, like to build up their skills, or is this truly the requirement? Now I'm just ranting.
I love it. If you can't find the talent, just make the talent. I mean, that's perfect.
It's not that hard.
It takes a little bit of time. I'm sure building a boot camp doesn't happen overnight. But I want to talk more tactical. So how to use AI. So I know that specifically I've seen different types of contracts within a federal agency. You can ask like the pain points that agency has. You can get details like the size of the contracts, incumbents, government POCs, literally like so much that you can ask AI. And you can do it all pretty quickly. And so I know that particularly with small organizations, that can get you a lot of information without spending a lot of time doing it. So that's more of like the business capture, BD kind of side. Recruiting, tips, tricks. I want to hear how you use tech to your advantage to make your jobs easier.
I use ChatGPT for like everything, not gonna lie. People will ask me the wildest out of like questions that I'm like, I don't even know where to start to draft the answer to you. And then I go ask ChatGPT and I'm like, you know what? When you sent me the list of questions for this panel, I put it in ChatGPT and I said, answer this from the perspective of a CPO at a small tech startup that is a government contractor. And some of the answers I was like, okay, but I'm like, I have a worksheet to work with. I literally asked ChatGPT everything, like, come on. But with candidates, asking like, I sometimes ask, where can I find these people? And it'll give me some like, oh, there's a DevOps all day Slack group that you can post jobs in. I didn't know about that. Stephanie and I were talking earlier about this, about how when it gets hard, and especially when you're looking at those resumes and there's so much tech jargon, putting the resume into AI and being like, either explain this to me like I'm 5, or like comparing 2 resumes and saying like, what are the biggest differences here? Or like, we just talked about this earlier. I'm not gonna take your example, but what you told me with your, I oftentimes have leadership say, I want another Dave. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I want you to replicate Dave. Go find another Dave. I'm like, okay, well, and that's where Stephanie and I were talking, like, taking the resumes of your current employees, the ones that they're like, make me another one of him or her, and taking those resumes, putting them in AI, looking for the consistencies, and saying, where do I go to find this type of candidate? How can I appeal to this type of candidate? Like, what am I looking for? in this type of role?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the biggest thing that's helped me is so if I have a new requisition that opens, right, and I'm going into an intake meeting with the hiring team, I will use AI to come up with some questions to ask the hiring team, or just a way to kind of organize my thoughts. Here's the thing, I'm not an engineer and I don't pretend to be. I will never ever say that I'm at the same level as an engineer to understand their experience. And that's gone a long way with my hiring team. Like, they have respect for me showing up prepared and ready to hit the ground. Because again, they're taking away from their time and resources of all the really cool, super cool stuff that they do to basically educate me to fill these positions. So it's been a game changer that way for me.
And I'll add something else too. Something that gets these technical folks' attention is when you're not sending that similar cold email or message on LinkedIn or wherever you're messaging them at, coming from that recruiter perspective. Now, if you're coming to them with hey, I took a look at your code in GitHub, and they're like, wait a minute, okay, I'm listening. You're a recruiter, why are you in my GitHub? And talking to them about their code, which, listen, I know that's real hard. That's why we use AI for some of that stuff, not to generate a response to them, but to help understand what we're looking at so that we can draft a message to them. That's been a game changer, honestly, because they're like, wow, I've never had a recruiter reach out to me and talk to me about what's in my GitHub or how the code is similar. Or, hey, I thought you'd be interested in this project we're working on because of some of your recent commits on GitHub. And they're like, this is different than my normal recruiter. I got a lot of people reaching out to me and not one of them have said anything like that. So bridging that gap of the tech knowledge, because I'm not going to expect every recruiter to be able to do something like that. That's kind of crazy. But when you have AI on your side and you can ask it questions and utilize it to build that gap between engineering and recruiting, then that's another tool you got in your pocket.
Yeah, so outreach, obviously an easy one. I love stuff figuring out what questions to ask, because I feel like that's something that you just kind of, before AI, stumbled through. As you went through interviews, this candidate asked me about that, but you have no idea as a recruiter to ask these kinds of questions. So that's an amazing way to utilize the tool. I know, yeah, so drafting emails, outreach, drafting job descriptions, adding things to those really vague statement of works. And then I know that applicant tracking systems too, some of them have their own sort of tech-enabled AI, sometimes AI. In what ways can AI enhance the recruitment process for those hard-to-fill positions? And what are some other ways that you use them within your own teams? And ethically use it. We also need to talk about that.
Well, first off, removing any identification so that, we're not, there's, people are worried about AI with that bias of is it picking these people because of the way their name looks or anything like that. So removing any identifiable information from those things and then just laying it out data-wise. And I'm talking in the sense of resume review. And AI resume review, honestly, I work for a company that does AI. I don't know why I'm saying this, but AI makes me a little nervous sometimes. And I took pride in reading every single resume because I never wanted to be the one to be oh, it was in the keywords and you didn't put the keyword in and now your resume's at the bottom even though you're highly qualified. I think AI has come a long way since then. And seeing how you could have AI review 1,000 reviews and then give you the top 100, but making sure that the information you're feeding AI is, I want it to say Kubernetes, but there's different ways of saying Kubernetes. We know that. You can say K8. So there's a lot of technical jargon and there's a lot of different ways these engineers, put it in their resume. So having that's where it comes in, talking with your engineers and making sure you understand that, and then training the AI tool to output what you want. And then it makes it not so bad, you know? Now I've got 1,000 whittled down to 100. I could look at these. I have enough time to do it. And just there's so many ways to make it more efficient. There's so many different ways to automate the process with AI. Like, I've kind of like mapped out the whole entire process and like how many days in each step is this taking, and then pinpointing this one. Okay, first off, like, why are we doing this? And second off, do we need to? And then, is this something that can be automated? Is this something that we could easily like put in our system? Could we time it out? Could we remove the human factor of this particular administrative role so that the human factor is spent in the culture interview or in the technical interview where it really matters? It's like, maybe I'm speaking too vague. Am I speaking too vague about AI? Okay, I'm like, I want to give you guys something to walk away with.
Yeah, I think those are good.
Yeah, for me, it's right now I'm leaning into using AI to really just automate the boring, simple stuff. I think everyone in here right now, you could take out a piece of paper and write at least 2 things that you do, you know, every single day. Maybe it could be automated, follow up with a candidate, that sort of thing. I know there are ATSs that like can score resumes and bring up like the top 10% that match, you know, the job description. I'm really hesitant about that. I have a lot of pride, like you said, Michaela, about I get eyes on every single resume. I reject it, not the ATS, I reject it. Maybe the knockout questions will, you know, reject some, but those are knockout questions. So yeah, I want to remain really ethical with how, as a recruiter, I start using AI more in my processes.
Right. And so let's talk a little bit about the candidate experience. I know that technology can be used, like chatbots, I know have been referred to today. Communication, scheduling, you can use tech. Like, are there any other ways that your companies utilize technology? I guess with still balancing candidate experience from like applicant to potential employee.
It's not like we can talk about automating emails and that's something, but I really like to put a lot of the information up front, those emails. I think that that's super beneficial and makes the candidates feel like you're being completely transparent with them. So like putting the full benefits overview in there already so they don't have to reach back and ask, hey, what do you, parental leave or 401k? Like, what does that look like? Like, nope, you already got the information. It's already there. Providing the position description, because like that's another one. It seems so simple, but automating those things, because reaching out one by one and providing those things is such a pain. So thinking like, if I were a candidate, what would I want access to? What questions would I have after the fact? Like, what am I going to reach back to the recruiter and say, hey, I forgot to ask this? That way, like, if you can think all their benefits questions are answered and their questions about the position description, like they have the position description so they can get those questions out there so they're not answering, or they're not asking after the fact. Like, there's more room for like legit human interaction questions instead of just going through the, you know, the standard ones of like, yes, I never provided that information to you and of course you're going to ask for it. Now we can talk more about like the projects you could be working on or what teams you might be working on, rather than like getting through all the, what I think is just like, come on, just provide the information up front. The salary too.
Sure.
I'm big about that. Just put the salary on the job rec, like, please.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think it saves a lot of time. I mean, other tech, if anybody on here uses ClearanceJobs, like making sure you have those workflows set, I mean, those are just easy ways to take care of monotonous tasks. Any tech that you can think of to add, Steph? Nothing to add there. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, so I think just what also I've heard a lot in panels today, like knowing what data to put into AI. So like maybe this is just more conversations that you bring back to like not only your recruiters, your hiring managers, your leadership. What data should I be asking these questions? So once the right candidate is hired, let's talk retention in the organization. Do you all have any go-to strategies there? Because no one likes to have to backfill.
Yeah, so so when someone goes to offer and they accept, obviously I congratulate them, but I let them know our relationship does not end here. And I actually mean it. And then I build in automations for follow-up to build that relationship long-term, right? It's about not only maintaining that relationship, because I really do care. It's not just about putting someone in a seat. I think, MetroStar is a fantastic company. I could talk about it all day. But retaining them, I want to make sure that they still maintain that touch point with me, even if they reach out to me on something that is totally, HR or a different department. I will field them to that person, the point of contact. I want to make sure that they're taken care of, like throughout, their time with us. And I think that makes asking for referrals so much easier because you have that established relationship. You also have that ongoing open communication to where one of my engineers recently came and said, hey, I have this issue. I'm not really sure who to bounce this off of. Can we chat, right? So I identified something that needed to be corrected, and we've retained this person. So again, for me, it goes back to just like actual relationships. Don't just say you're going to do it, but do it. Follow up for no reason. Send a message through, Teams or Slack, whatever you use, just to say, hey, how's it going?
We're pretty crazy about culture at Defense Unicorns, and so it feels like, and we're very intentional about it too. Like since the beginning of the company, we have once a week, it's called Unicorn Stew. And you're matched up with now it's 7 random people in the company, and you just take 30 minutes, you sit at a table, and it's the same 30 minutes every Thursday. So it's not that people forget to schedule it, and you could just talk about whatever you want. And this is how you're Misty in contracts and Michaela in human resources. I literally never see you guys because I am so nose deep in code. And this is my first time ever really getting to know about your dog and your kids. And then also we call them donuts, where you're randomly paired one-on-one with someone every 2 weeks. And then you guys meet for 30 minutes and just get to know each other. 2 very simple things. Yes, we've had feedback, not from internally, but externally, that's such a waste of company time. It's 30 minutes. And it's yeah, but it's 30 minutes that people are building connections so that when somebody, a new hiring manager needs to come talk to me, we already know each other. We're already friends. We're already hey, I know you. We share dog photos back and forth. We also just have built that culture in Slack too of parents of Defense Unicorns, dogs of Defense Unicorns, random, everyone's just sharing so many things constantly that we're not siloed, or at least we're trying our damnedest not to silo anybody or any teams. And I think that really helps with retention, because if you feel like you have a problem or a question, there's so many people, there's an abundance of people to ask that you shouldn't feel scared. But also another one too, because this is so big in Govy world, is that and this is use of AI, built a Doug bot. Doug is the name of the unicorn, by the way. Built a Doug bot where you could ask him about acronyms. What the hell does this acronym mean? What does that spell out? Because that's one that gets me too, that I'm I don't know that acronym now. And now we're working with Army and Navy, and they have the same acronym, but they're different. It's just a lot. And so having those resources readily available so they don't feel so alone coming into the company and being I feel like I'm learning a different language. That helps with retention.
Yeah, and I think making those connections, or knowing where to use technology so you can still be human, make those connections, because technology is never going to take that away. I think also the other big takeaway, in addition to using this technology, is knowing, okay, now you need to be at events, even though candidates didn't really like in-person events, after COVID. Now is the time. You need to be content marketers, apparently. You need to be sourcers. You need to be everything. Not really, but utilize resources. ClearanceJobs is obviously here to help. I think we don't have any time for questions. Can somebody please tell me if I'm crazy?
You have one.
Thank you both so much. Does anybody have any questions?
Or the donut.
Okay.
Thank you again for hearing me. So Michaela, you mentioned earlier about confusing job descriptions and getting with the hiring manager, asking creative questions to get, is this really a must-have? Yada yada yada. This might be like super specific to my experience, but I don't know if you've ever dealt with this. Like, how would you deal with? I'm thinking of like our number one client at my agency is MIT Lincoln Laboratory, and the famous phrase around the office is "the labos do nothing." Like, they are brutal when it comes to that stuff. So we basically just kind of have to suck it up and go with what they give us. I have had like multiple times where I've wanted to go to my account manager and like, this doesn't make sense. Like, what are we looking at here? And those questions sometimes do get asked and just simply not answered. To the point where now my account manager sort of is just like, it is what it is. So do you have any advice?
I hate that phrase. It is what it is.
Seriously, it's the most
This is how we've always done it. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like,
any advice on that?
First thing comes to mind is like, there's gonna need to be that hard conversation that's like, hey, I want to provide the best work for you. I want to provide you with the perfect candidate or like whatever you're asking of me, and I need more context. That is actually one of our values at Defense Unicorns is context, because this type of thing would always happen. And so we build it into our culture, which I know you can't do that with an external client, but I don't know, do you feel like you're like, you can't have those conversations further? Have they like already cut it off of like, you can't ask for context? Do you feel like you can't ask for context?
I feel like I can ask my account manager. I would say we're close, like we work very hand in hand every day. And she's receptive to this stuff, but she's been working with them for 20 years.
Yeah.
It's just, I think she's kind of beaten down by it. But at the same time, they're our number one client. So
Yeah.
they get pushed on us a lot to work their stuff. It's frustrating sometimes. Fantastic client. But
Yeah, my next question would be, okay, if you guys can't take the time to give the information to me, can you at least do me this one-time favor of providing me some resources so I can take those resources, plug them into ChatGPT, or like research them, plug them into ChatGPT, just so I can have more context on like what you're asking, or like how I can best serve you guys. Like I would very much pose it as like, one-time thing, I need your help one time. Just give me the resources I need to find the information, and then I won't keep bugging y'all about it. And maybe then, I don't know, I always like to, I like to make connections, and I like to have my homies in all my different spaces that I'm like, okay, I have my security homie I can talk to. Like, I'm like, make a homie.
Thank you.